Hi there. Today we're going to talk about something other than tools. It's actually called layers, and it's a feature of most digital manipulation programs. Now, for layers themselves, you have a palette that will appear either down here. This is my layers palette here, or it'll appear over here. If you don't see it anywhere, you can click on your configure this tab button on any of these three here, as you can see when I tooltip over them, and you can add tab and you can add layers. If you do see it but you don't like where it is, you can grab the layers palette and drag it over just by dragging it off, by grabbing its icon and dragging it off and dropping it into another spot. However, it's not the same configuration as adding a tab, which will put it, give you lots of space to see what you're doing. So when we're using layers, you have to think of this program and layers as a concept, kind of like a stack of pancakes. So you have one pancake, or the plate being the bottom, I should say. You add a pancake on top, but you can still see the plate. You add another pancake on top of that pancake, you can maybe see the pancake underneath, and you see the plate, and so on and so on and so on. So as we add layers, we're adding pieces. Maybe at the end of those stack of pancakes, you add butter. Now your butter is on top of all the pancakes, but you can see all the pancakes. You can see the plate if you were looking down on it. And on top of that, maybe you add berries. So berries, butter, and every pancake on top of the plate is a layer. And it becomes like a kind of a stack. Now, virtually, how that looks is we're looking down on it, kind of like an aerial point of view. It's also two-dimensional, so we're not getting the same visualization I've just given you, except that the stacking still works the same. So we're going to start just by opening a new file. And you don't have to you choose a template at all. Size is fine. Just leave all that default. And my background is black. Yours could be something else. Don't worry if it looks different. We're going to grab the paint bucket tool, the fill tool. And I'm just going to go to my tool options here, and I'm going to make sure I choose pattern fill. And I'm just going to choose any pattern. Probably, well, it doesn't really matter. Something that you can contrast with. So I'm going to choose something light, marble. And there we go. So that's the first step. Second step is we want to now go back to our layers, and we can see that we have a background layer. That is our plate. I can double click that and change the title. I will call it base layer. Background maybe, and this allows you to refer to it that way. When you're doing it, it's easier to remember which layer is which. You can call it something you intend it to be, etc., etc. So I'm going to leave base layer background, and now I'm going to right click, and I'm going to say, well, we can do new layer here, or we can come down here and do new layer down here, as you can see. So I'm going to right click and just say new layer. And when I select the new layer, I just leave it as it is, transparent. I'm not going to select a color. Make sure that's unclicked, make sure it's visible, and I'm going to say OK. So my new layer appears above my old layer. So anything I put on top of the base layer will appear above. If I want that item to be below the base layer, I would pull it below the base layer. Now, because we used a background and filled our layer, we wouldn't see it below the base layer. But you'll get a sense of this in a second. So we're going to go to our shape, our shape selection tool, and I'm going to just click on maybe a square here, and just draw a square. Grab my paint bucket, and this time I'm going to use color. Make sure my tool options are set to color. Okay, and I'm going to paint that orange, and that's on my first layer. My second layer, because I'm going to then create a new one. Okay, I'm going to grab a different shape maybe, and I'm going to paint or draw a different shape. And if you noticed over here, really important is that I'm selecting the layer I'm drawing on. That's why I'm not drawing on the same layer as this or having any issues with this. I'm on the layer on top. If I wanted to draw on the base layer, I would choose the base layer to draw on. So I would select it like this. Right now I'm on this layer. That's the one I want to draw on. That's the one I want to make a circle on. I'm going to grab another color, and I'm going to fill it. I'm going to say OK. In this case, I'm just going to toggle off the visibility of the first layer. And I'm going to do the second layer the same way so that they're blank. And we're going to say new layer again. And we're going to grab another shape. There's only really two we can work with, but we'll keep going that way. And I'm going to draw my new shape. And I'm going to fill that with a new color. Okay, I'm going to make that less visible, and I'm going to grab another new layer and add my fourth new layer. And we're going to draw a square, big square. And we'll choose another color, and we'll fill that again, this time with blue. And we'll say OK. So when I add them all up, I've got my base layer. That's all I've selected, all that's visible. I'm going to toggle the visibility of the next 4 layers. And as you can see, they're starting to stack on top of each other. And I will grab the move tool and just move that guy over. But as you can see, I can still manipulate all of them, even though they're on a different layer. As I select it, the layer changes. So I'm going to move the square over, and to that point, we'll say select none. And as I move them around, the layer changes, puts me on a different layer here. So that is generally the sense of it. As I want to add an item to my picture, I can do so by creating a new layer, adding the item, and toggling visibility to make sure it all appears. If I want to work on a layer and I don't want the distraction of the other layers, I just untoggle them, work on my layer. Maybe I'm drawing something here, sorry, not with blue. If I'm drawing something here on my layer, and then I want to toggle them back, you get the idea. So generally, that's the sense of layers. If I wanted to move that blue layer lower and have the other ones appear above it because it's bigger, I simply drag the layer down, and I see that line between each. Drag it down to where I want it, and then place it. That puts the other 3 layers in front. If I'm like, no, I want the lime layer behind orange, I would just move it down. If I want orange above red, I would move it up, and so on and so forth. And that's generally how you do it. And I'll put my polka dots all over the place. Notice I'm on the orange layer. Put my red layer above orange. And there we go. And that's generally the sense of layers. What you do in digital imaging is you'll actually end up using real images and pieces of images and putting them in the same way you did this exercise.